2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach? We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. We need to prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
9:30 on Tuesday, the 14th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. She's back from her latest holiday.
It's lovely to be back. Now, Ozempic breakthrough. Millions of middle-aged Brits could be given weight loss injections to cut their risks of heart attack and strokes by a fifth. But what might the risks of the injection also be?
And politicians arrested for serious sexual offences could be banned from attending Parliament automatically after a vote by 170 to 169 votes in favour only last night.
And unemployment has risen. The amount of people out of work in Britain has hit its highest rate for almost a year. Why do you think that might be?
And crack down on those Just Stop Oil protesters. The government's advisor on political violence says groups like Just Stop Oil should be treated like terrorist organisations. But are they going just perhaps a step too far?
Great stories today, a lot of diverse...
And don't forget smartphones too.
Oh, and smartphones. We're going to be talking to Miriam Cates, MP, who is leading this charge to restrict the use of mobile phones for children, something I am also very much on board with. Are you? Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/yoursafe. First, the very latest news with Sam Francis.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 9:30. The headlines this hour from the newsroom. As we heard, the rate of unemployment is at its highest level for nearly a year, while wage growth remains unchanged at 6%. There were 26,000 fewer job vacancies in the 3 months to April, while the number of people in work dropped by 85,000. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, struck an optimistic tone this morning, saying that wages are outstripping inflation. But it could be an unhelpful sign for those hoping for a cut in interest rates. Well, Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride says that Britain's job market, though, does remain resilient.
Unemployment is 40% down on the level it was in 2010. Economic inactivity overall is below the average of the OECD, the G7 and the European Union, and below the level in France, Italy and the United States. And of course what we've also seen is real wages growing for the 10th consecutive month. Real wage growth, which is really important, I think, in terms of giving people security and more money in their pockets. And overall, of course, the economy is now growing at its fastest rate in the last 2 years.
Mel Stride there speaking earlier this morning. In other news, shoppers will be told to back British produce as the Prime Minister prepares to address farmers later. Rishi Sunak will say that Britain must reduce its reliance on fruit and vegetables from overseas as he announces the first UK Food Security Index, which will monitor production, land use and input costs. Labour, though, says the Conservatives have driven farmers to breaking point and have pledged a new deal that they say will put money back in their pockets. And how do you feel about a bowl of slippery, slimy bugs for breakfast? Certainly not me. But if that's enough to make your stomach turn, well, a new study suggests that flour made from insects could help make that idea more palatable. Insects are rich in protein, easier to farm, and they have less of an impact on the environment than livestock. And apparently, when they're incorporated into food, they could help tackle obesity. But surveys suggest most people are reluctant to eat them. Researchers say that using flour derived from ground crickets or freeze-dried mealworms could be an effective way to introduce them to the mainstream. I'm not convinced. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It is 9:34. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, it's a government-commissioned report which says that organisations like Just Stop Oil, which drive us nuts, don't they, and Palestine Action, behind all those marches on Saturdays, should be prescribed as if they are a terror organisation.
So this report, led by former Labour MP and friend of this show, John Woodcock, recommends creating extreme protest restriction orders which could see the groups banned.
So is Woodcock, Lord Warney, as he now known, is he right? Protest groups should be treated like terror organisations. I can see what he means, but we have to defend, don't we, the right to protest?
We have to defend the right to protest. And also, one person's terror group might be Just Stop Oil, whereas they would be to other people. They are crusading for the future generations. I think it's quite a dangerous precedent.
But those marches on Saturday, right, haven't they made their point? But when they are held... The Palestinian marches, when Jewish men and women feel they cannot go near central London because they feel intimidated, and we've heard the anti-Semitic abuse, which isn't stopped by the police, should those marches be stopped?
What I don't understand about the Just Stop Oil protesters is that, according to various commentators, the police already have sufficient powers to move them on, and they're just not using them. So why? We have to be really careful, I think, that we don't have this crisis situation with these protesters who do cause huge disruption. But the solution to that problem affects then all of us in any sphere in which we might wish to have our voices heard.
Well, let's have a discussion like this. Joining us now is Kevin Schofield, well known to this programme. He's from the HuffPost UK, and the political commentator Benedict Spence. Gentlemen, good morning. Kevin, let's talk to you first with your bleeding heart Liberal hat on here. If you don't mind me saying so. What's your take on this? Is he going too far in saying that groups like Just Stop Oil should be treated like terrorists?
Yeah, I find myself in agreement with yourself here, Andrew. I think it is going too far. Just Stop Oil are annoying. The whole point of them is that they're annoying. They will admit that they're annoying. That is the whole purpose of what they do. They want to annoy people and cause as much disruption as possible. But I think prescribing them effectively as if they were a terrorist organisation, I think most people would agree that that's a step too far. I think the main problem here is they think that they can act with impunity because the cases take so long to come to court. It can be years between arrest and potential conviction. So you can absolutely understand why they think, well, it's worth the hassle because we're not going to see the inside of a court for a very long time, so we might as well do it. Surely it's better to invest more money in freeing up this logjam within the court system and therefore allowing the police to use the powers that they have to disperse these protests and then see these people eventually see some sort of justice. I think that is the problem here, that they feel they can act with impunity. I think that would be a better solution rather than just using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Benedict Spence, do you have similar concerns about civil liberties if we have governments saying that any protester is effectively a terrorist?
I think that what we've seen with organisations like Just Stop Oil, but also with, I suppose, to a lesser degree, perhaps the pro-Palestine marches, on a smaller scale, individuals perhaps behaving in a certain way, is that as Britain's society becomes far less about high trust, protesters feel that they can, as Kevin says, they can act with impunity, they can misbehave, and that in some ways the smallness of their protests actually justifies their misbehaving. And I think you think back to things like the Countryside Alliance marches or the protests against the war in Iraq, where you had huge numbers of people actually taking to the streets. But there was never any sort of real suggestion that these people were going to go out and act in a criminal fashion with impunity. Actually, one of the things that we had in this country for a very long time was the fact that people could go on demonstrations and actually be trusted up to a point to behave. There were some, exceptions, obviously, to that. But increasingly, I think when it came to marches across our capital city, that was the case. But what seems to actually define things like Just Stop Oil is the wanton desire to cause vandalism and disruption. It's not like they go out and they march and nobody listens and so they try to ratchet it up. It's the default mode that they go into art galleries, that they go into places of work, that they cause criminal damage. And also, frankly, they risk things becoming very dangerous, because one of the things that we have to remember about all of this is if you go out rather rather than simply to protest and make your voice heard, but to deliberately irritate and wind people up, you risk making other members of the public a party to it, because people will get angry, people will react if they're not able to get to work, if they are, having their days disrupted, if people are ill and they need to get to see a doctor, and you have some environmentalists, some 80-year-old environmentalists who has nowhere else better to be other than gluing themselves to a road, you do risk people actually taking matters into their own hands. And it is much the responsibility of the police to stop that from happening. So whilst I don't like the idea of us moving towards a direction where we are overly criminalizing organizations and using language like prescribing them like they're a terrorist organization, which is difficult enough as it is, given that there are actual terrorist organizations that we don't prescribe in this country for various reasons. I just think that the longer that we indulge a lot of these groups, and they are fringe groups, frankly, they are quite extreme in their views, the longer that we indulge this and we do not take them more seriously, the more likely it is that right now a lot of people don't necessarily agree with prescribing them, but that could very easily change.
Kevin, can we also talk about this morning another issue? Unemployment figures risen this morning. Now, we don't quite know the detail of this, and we're speculating as to why that might be. Is it that Brits are getting work shine? There is an element of choice not to work, particularly amongst younger people at the moment, or is this just a sign of a lack of growth over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter than the former. I think by and large people want to work, they want to earn money, pay tax, and improve their standard of living. The danger, I think, for the government here is that, we're hearing about the economy going gangbusters, we've turned a corner, stick with the plan. But the problem for the government is that if that doesn't feed through, if people don't feel like that is the case in their own day-to-day lives, then it could look to them like the government is out of touch. So this will be a concern, undoubtedly, for government, because it cuts across that narrative with the election looming, that they want to say that the economy is going really well, everything's looking rosy, and we've got through the worst of it, stick with us, don't take a chance with Labour. But data like this certainly won't help them.
Bennett, what about, Kevin conveniently ignores the fact that, now 2.8 million people now on sickness benefit because they're not well enough to go to work. A lot of them, it's their mental health, of course. Isn't that a big part of the problem now?
Mental health is poor mental health, we should say, rather than just mental health. Poor mental health is a part of the problem. And the issue that I have with that is there isn't really a concerted plan to get many people back into work or to alleviate their symptoms. And one of the problems we have in this country when it comes to mental health conditions, and it's not simply things like depression, you also see this in the way that children are medicated for being ADHD or whatever it is that there's this idea that you just prescribe people the pills and the therapy, and that's just kind of it, and that actually people can sort of continue on indefinitely. There's a real problem that we have about actually reintegrating people back into the workforce, because there is this idea that mental health is something that you can't really talk about too much. You can just say, oh, it's bad, here is your medication, I hope you feel better. But is there any sort of real drive to push people to get back into work? No, because people then turn around and say, well, that's cruel. You're potentially endangering that person's mental health. You're potentially making it worse. The pressures will amount and they won't be able to get back into the workforce. It's unsustainable. And it is equally unsustainable because obviously the taxpayer is having to fund this, whilst being told that there are huge, huge numbers of vacant jobs in this country, which we need to fill by bringing in people to work lower wages, which suppresses economic growth across the board. It's not a sustainable model. Actually, bringing in people to work minimum wage to prop up a system with millions of people on out-of-work benefits because of their mental health, that cannot go on in perpetuity. And yet, I don't see a long-term solution out of it, not coming from this government anyway.
Yeah, Kevin, how can we have both a labour shortage and high unemployment at the moment? We go into any shop or restaurant, we've all experienced it. There's not enough staff, there's not enough waiting staff. Sometimes I've been into restaurants where the kitchen has had to close because they can't get a chef. And yet we've got unemployment rising, so something has gone very badly wrong with our labour landscape in this country.
Yeah, and you've got to ask, I think, as you mentioned there, that growth, although it is just about returning to the economy, it's still been fairly anemic for a very long time, for several years, really. And the economy just isn't creating enough jobs, clearly, I don't think, to satisfy the demand that is there in the system. So, yeah, as I say, this is a very concerning piece of data. Hopefully it's a blip. Hopefully it turns around and it starts heading in the opposite direction, because, We've been through recessions, we've been through pandemics, we've been through financial crash, and by and large, unemployment has remained remarkably low, and the economy has remained pretty resilient. However, it's definitely one worth keeping an eye on, as I say, especially with an election coming, and Labour will seek to take advantage of it as much as possible.
OK, Kevin Schofield, Benedict Spence, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let us know your thoughts at home about what is going on with the employment situation.
I'm sorry.
I find it very puzzling.
I'm sorry, there's too many people swinging the lead, as my late dad would have said. They just are. And they don't want to do the lowly paid jobs, and the benefit system still disproportionately means you're better off working part-time or even being on benefits, which is a scandal. That was supposed to have been fixed 10 years ago. Ian Duncan had tried his best, didn't he, when he was working pension sector, but they're losing the plot on it.
What do you think? GBNews.com/your say. Up next, there's a huge football match on tonight. I'm sure you have set your diary clear, Andrew, to sit and watch the football.
No.
Man City against Tottenham. It could be a title decider, but it's not just those two teams who are going to be watching the game. We'll explain why in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the quaint Derbyshire village of Sudbury, there's a storm brewing between the local football club and the National Trust. This grass field might seem unremarkable, but for hundreds of years it's been part of the Sudbury Hall estate, playing host to the village football and cricket matches. Now the National Trust are planning to put an end to that tradition in the name of biodiversity, with plans for trees and plants where the football club play. Some worry it breaks a memorandum of wishes from the late Lord Vernon, whose family have lived here since 1660. Manager of Sudbury FC Tom Crutchley says he's upset at the decision.
Naturally disappointed. We've been here, this is our 9th year. We've put a lot of effort into here to keep playing, to maintain it. I'm from the village originally, so personally it was, it is very upsetting.
MP for Derbyshire Dales Sarah Dines says the National Trust aren't respecting the history of the site.
I feel they're trampling over the wishes of historic owners who gave up this wonderful site for the nation. And for over 100 years, people have played football and cricket here. It's incredibly sad. Incredibly sad, and it's against the wishes of a lot of people locally who've written to me from the village.
Sudbury Hall lives under the branding of the Children's Country House, a decision which Dines says is disrespectful to the history of the estate.
I mean, this is fake to make it into a children's theme park. It's almost a reimagining, and in fact that's the very words it says on their website. The house is reopened, it's been reimagined. I don't want our heritage to be reimagined. I think the National Trust has been captured by people who have different ideas than most people in this country.
Whilst the public will still be able to roam these historic grounds, the village feels like a legacy is being snatched away. Jack Carson, GB News, Sudbury.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. So a groundbreaking study has found that weight loss drugs like Ozempic can reduce the risk of heart attack and strokes by a fifth.
As cardiologists say, these weight loss jabs are the most significant development in heart disease prevention since 1990 with statins. But does it come with risks?
So joining us now is pharmacist Thorin Govind. Nice to see you again, Thorin. How are you? Good to see you. So people are very excited about this. We know that obesity is a terrible problem in all Western countries. It isn't just this one, and it is costing the NHS billions of pounds a year. So rejoice at the fact that there might be a solution. But does it come with risks, as every drug does?
Yeah, it's really important that we note that every drug does come with risks. But I would say this is exciting because we know that 8 million Brits have heart disease, and that costs the economy about 25 billion. So that is a huge amount of money that we're spending each year when it comes to, if you think about obesity, the big risk it has on the whole body, particularly our heart, which is why I've mentioned there about heart disease. Now, this is, I think this is really exciting. They've done this study, and it found that it helped those who didn't lose weight, but it also helped those who did. And as we heard there, it's reduced the risk of further heart attacks and death. I think this is something that we've got some really positive news about, because what we know is that drug development is not an easy process. That's why you don't hear lots about new drugs being developed, to be honest. It takes a while for them to come on the market. We're constantly monitoring the side effects. And you will have seen in the news that these drugs do also have risks as well. There's what they're calling Ozempic face, which is people having quite gaunt facial features, and it being quite obvious in some cases that they have taken medication which is to reduce their weight. So I think this is an exciting possibility given the effects and positivity on the heart. But I also think we need to be careful, and we shouldn't be rushing to this. And all of these weight loss drugs, you have to be looking at the diet, and you have to be looking at exercise as well. They're not a quick fix, and that is my concern.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Won't this encourage people who want to be a couch potato, sit in front of the television, eating rubbish processed food, to think, doesn't matter now, I can take this drug, it's going to help me with my weight, and more importantly, it's going to prevent heart disease?
So here's the thing. As soon as you stop taking them, we know you can start to put on the weight again. So really, for me, I would be saying before you even start these drugs, and remember, these are prescription-only medications. You need to have a consultation with a prescriber. Don't think about getting them online or from stranger sources online, because you don't know what drug you're getting. You need to make sure you're getting the proper drug from a licensed provider. And you then need to think, before you even start it, you need to think about measures you're going to take in your lifestyle. This is part of a lifestyle change. It's not a quick fix. And I think people who are going to start taking it and thinking this is a quick fix are actually putting themselves in a really dangerous position, I think.
OK, thank you, Thorin Given, their pharmacist. We're going to be talking about this again at 11 o'clock as well with Renee Hundekamp, who feels quite strongly that we have to be quite cautious with this.
I think you do, with all drugs. Now, we're very versatile on this programme, but we don't normally talk about football, which I know nothing about. Apparently there are 11 players in a team. Did you know that, Beverly?
All men, normally.
Normally all men. But tonight, Tottenham could hand the Premier League title to Arsenal if they beat Manchester City. Now, Paul Coit is glorious.
I'm not squirming or looking uncomfortable in any way whatsoever.
So you can explain to us, Paul, Tottenham need to win tonight if they want to qualify for Europe, but why are so many Tottenham fans rooting for Manchester City to win tonight?
Right, so Spurs...
And you're a Tottenham fan.
I am indeed. Spurs play Manchester City tonight. Now, Manchester City, the way that the table is at the moment, we're coming to the end of the Premier League season, which ends this weekend.
Good.
Which will be... See, the thing is, Andrew walks past my desk every day, talks football, pretends there's no sport, loves the football. Arsenal have played 37 games, they've got 1 game left, and they're on 86 points. And then we've got Manchester City, who have got 2 games left on 85. Now, stop me if I'm throwing you. So, Manchester City will play Spurs tonight. Now, the fact is, if Manchester City lose to Spurs, and Spurs would want to win, that's basically handing Arsenal the title, because there will be 1 game left, and if Arsenal win it, then it's their title.
And that would just be too much
and that, for Spurs fans, is just unthinkable.
Because of the London rivalry.
Because of the huge rivalry between Spurs and Arsenal. So it's one of the first games I can ever remember where I know that there are Spurs fans that would prefer to lose the game. Now, if there was nothing to play for Spurs, then you'd think, well, that's OK, because maybe they would roll over. But there's still a chance that Spurs could get into the Champions League. Now, that is a possibility if they win the next 2 games and Aston Villa lose their next one. So The question is, would Spurs fans be happy to actually say, OK, we won't go in the Champions, we'd rather not be in the Champions League if it means that Arsenal didn't win the title?
How torn are you?
I'm not torn at all, because obviously I just want Spurs to win every game.
Every time I talk to you about football, you start foaming at the mouth at the very idea Arsenal might win the Premier League.
Well, look, that's true. It's an awful thought for any Tottenham Hotspur fan that Arsenal would win the title. But it's awful, the fact that it's coming to this game and then you think, am I going to question my own team here and want them to lose? The answer is no, because really, to be honest with you, it goes a whole season. If they deserve it, they deserve it. But when it comes to emotions, different kettle of fish.
Who is going to win it?
Who is going to win it?
No.
I think Manchester City will win it. I actually do think they'll win it. But also the other thing is that you would expect Manchester City to do that, but Spurs are their bogey team. Of all the teams they play, for some reason, they've never scored a goal at the new Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. This is in 7 years in the Premier League. So it could go either way, but it's going to be an uncomfortable view.
Thank you, Paul.
And I'm not watching.
Oh, yes, you will.
I'm not watching.
Right,
Rubbish.
what's come this morning, including Miriam Cates MP talking about whether children should be banned from using smartphones. Don't go anywhere.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A dull and a damp day for many today, but it will be brighter compared to yesterday in parts of Wales and southwest England, and northern Scotland again doing OK for some warm sunshine here. But sunshine in short supply today over southern Scotland, northern and eastern parts of England, North Wales too, staying pretty dull and pretty damp throughout, maybe brightening up at times across the east coast of England. Much brighter compared to yesterday for Wales and southwest England, some sunny spells here, but possibility of 1 or 2 sharp showers. Feeling warmer here as well, but for most under the cloud and rain, feeling cooler. But northern Scotland, look at that, a bit of sunshine in the Moray Firth. Could see temperatures easily into the low 20s. The rain will continue to drift into parts of western Scotland, southern Scotland, the far north of England, staying pretty damp well into this evening. But further south, the rain should generally peter out. A few more showers milling into parts of Devon, Cornwall and Pembrokeshire. Quite a mild night again. Temperatures holding up 11 or 12 Celsius in towns and cities. On to Wednesday, and it could again be pretty drab over some eastern coastal counties of England. Grey here with rain and drizzle on and off. The Fret and the Har may return to eastern Scotland. It's a bit brighter over the Midlands, northwest England and southwest Scotland compared to today. Again, western Scotland seeing some good spells of sunshine. Just 1 or 2 scattered showers in the southwest. And in the sunny spells, feeling quite warm. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M65 in Lancashire is partly blocked westbound by an accident between junctions 10 and 9 near Burnley, causing delays. On the M62 in Greater Manchester, the inside lane's closed eastbound after an accident between junctions 21 and 22 from Mill Road to Rishworth Moor, with queues towards and past there. In Newport, the A48 is closed southbound from junction 24 of the M4 at the Coldra to the Hartridge Farm roundabout after an accident yesterday afternoon, causing queues. On the M25 from Essex into Hertfordshire, there are anti-clockwise queues from junction 27 for the M11 to 25 for the A10 after a breakdown earlier. In Surrey, the A22 remains closed each way between the Wapsie Lodge roundabout at Caterham and the M25 at Godstone after a fuel spill on Sunday. And in Devon, the A30 is closed westbound from Fingal Glen to Cheriton Bishop after an accident causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday the 14th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Big breakthrough on Ozempic. Millions of middle-aged Brits could be given the weight loss injections to cut not just their weight, but the risk of heart attacks and stroke by a fifth. But, of course, there will be side effects.
So politicians arrested for serious sexual offences could be banned from attending Parliament after MPs voted 170 to 169 in favour of this last night. That's only arrested, not charged.
Unemployment's gone up. The number of people out of work in Britain has hit its highest rate for almost a year. We'll explain why.
And Farm to Fork Summit. Rishi Sunak welcomes farmers to Downing Street today as he announces new support for agriculture. But will it be enough? We're going to be talking to 2 farmers who are going to be there at Downing Street today to tell us why. Did you see the tractor parked outside Downing Street? Right, Rishi Sunak's obviously collaborating and cooperating with that campaign.
And it's a lot to do with blimmin' EU. I thought we'd left the EU.
Yeah. Do you
so
watch
why are they still meddling and sticking their nose in?
Do you watch Clarkson's Farm?
I do.
Oh, it's so good. If you want to understand farming in a way, Clarkson's Farm has done a brilliant job of lifting the lid on what life is really like for a farmer. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbnews.com/your say. First, to the very latest news with Sam.
Bev and Andrew, thank you very much. Good morning to you. It's just after 10 o'clock. Leading the news this morning, as we heard there, the rate of unemployment is at its highest level for nearly a year, while wage growth is unchanged at 6%. There were 26,000 fewer job vacancies in the 3 months to April, while the number of people in work dropped by 85,000. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, struck an optimistic tone this morning, saying that wages are outstripping inflation, but that it could be an unhelpful sign for those hoping for a cut in interest rates. Well, Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride says Britain's job market remains resilient.
Unemployment is 40% down on the level it was in 2010. Economic inactivity overall is below the average of the OECD, the G7 and the European Union, and below the level in France, Italy and the United States. And of course what we've also seen is real wages growing for the 10th consecutive month. Real wage growth, which is really important, I think, in terms of giving people security and more money in their pockets. And overall, of course, the economy is now growing at its fastest rate in the last 2 years.
In other news, there are warnings that Britain's upcoming fleet of ships and submarines might be outdated before they even hit the waves. Former Royal Navy Commander Rear Admiral Chris Parry says there's an urgent need to swiftly adapt to evolving warfare technology. The warning comes as the Defence Secretary prepares to address the annual First Sea Lords Conference, heralding what he's calling a golden era of shipbuilding for the Navy. Grant Shapps told us this morning that the government's making that critical investment because he says Britain will need to fight and win future battles.
We are living in more dangerous times, clearly. We've got a war in Europe with Ukraine being illegally invaded. We've got conflict in the Middle East, and we've got the rise of China, who really do present a big, and we've described it as epoch-defining change to the world. And Britain and the United Kingdom and our allies must be ready for that.
Grant Shapps there speaking to us earlier this morning. Well, shoppers will be told to back British produce as the Prime Minister prepares to address farmers later. Rishi Sunak will say that Britain must reduce its reliance on fruit and vegetables from overseas as he announces the first UK Food Security Index, which will monitor production, land use and input costs. Labour, though, says the Conservatives have driven farmers to breaking point and have pledged a new deal that they say will put money back in farmers' pockets. A watchdog is warning that dangerous criminals are being freed from prison too early as the government tries to address overcrowding in jails. Chief Inspector of Prisons Charlie Taylor has raised what he says are serious concerns about the policy, citing high-risk inmates are selected for early release. Some examples include a domestic abuser who may have posed a risk to children and a man with a serious drug problem and a history of self-harm. Researchers this morning are hailing new findings which suggest that weight loss injections could have benefits beyond just shedding the pounds. More than 17,000 participants from over 40 countries took part in the largest study of semaglutide so far. While the drug, which is sold under the brand names Ozempic and Wegovy, showed significant weight loss, it also reduced the risk of heart attack, stroke and heart failure by 20%. And that was even if the patients lost no weight. Doctors say those findings will challenge health authorities, which currently limit treatments of the jabs to just 2 years. Some tech news now, and rival to ChatGPT called Claude is now available in Europe and in Britain. The AI assistant's been developed by Amazon-backed startup Anthropic. The company says a special method of training called constitutional AI means the technology is bound by a set of values to avoid doing any harm. And a dedicated team, they say, will track and address any risks to the system, like possible misinformation, bias or even election interference. And finally, before we head back to Andrew and Bev, how do you feel about a bowl of bugs for breakfast? Well, if it's enough to make your stomach turn, a new study has suggested that flour made from creepy crawlies could help make the idea more palatable. Insects are rich in protein, they're easier to farm, and they have less of an impact on the environment than livestock. And apparently, when they're incorporated into your food, they could also help tackle obesity. But surveys suggest most of us are reluctant to eat them. Researchers say that ground crickets or freeze-dried mealworms could be an effective way to introduce them to the mainstream. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. For more, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to our website, gbnews.com/alerts.
10:06 is Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. John has just asked, if anybody on the show today is taking the weight loss drug, you need to ask how they're getting it, because at the moment, my understanding is, John says it's illegal and GPs throughout England are not allowed to prescribe it.
We're going to talk to a GP about that, but I think if you've got type 2 diabetes, you can have it prescribed, but there are all sorts of qualifications.
Yeah, we're going to be talking, like I say, in just a moment to a doctor and also to a friend of the show, Carol Malone, who takes Ozempic, to tell us what that's like to take it. About these unemployment figures, Carol has said people are working full-time with health problems, both physical and mental. It makes thousands of working people angry to support the people who choose not to work, but are happy to make the use of money sometimes provided by the tax paid by someone in worse health than themselves. It's a very good point. On Clarkson's farm, we've got this, we're going to be talking to two farmers who are at number 10 today for the Farm to Fork campaign. I watched them all last night. Yes, it is not always easy for farmers, says Martin, who is a GB News member. Thank you, Martin. It was quite emotional watching this programme. Farmers, and yes, farmers get overrun by deer, and do they need da-da-da-da-da? Anyway, Clarkson and his wife and Tim Rand that does a brilliant job. This series is great. Yes, that's absolutely.
When I saw that tractor in outside number 10, it just had this whiff of gimmick about it.
It does a bit, but it's.
I'm glad he's engaging with them, and
yeah.
you've got to engage with them because you've got to talk to farmers.
Yeah.
We've seen all those protests throughout Europe.
Yeah.
We've seen them in Wales. Did we see them in Scotland as well?
Yeah, we saw them all around the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Germany, the Netherlands was huge.
Yeah.
Paris.
And it's because so many farmers now are being told by governments they have to give up agricultural land and plant trees. It's all about saving the environment, of course, which means how are they going to feed us? And where's the money coming through?
Lots of your messages coming. Keep them coming. WhatGBNews.com/your-say.
Breaking news here, because we're crossing to the Court of Appeal, which is delivering the ruling on Valdo Calaconi. He is the Nottingham killer. His sentencing. Let's have a listen.
The offences, understandably, caused shock and concern throughout the country and beyond, and unimaginable grief to the victims' families and friends. The offender is now 32 years old. He does not appear to have had mental health problems until 2019, and he had no previous convictions. The psychiatric experts agreed that the offender was suffering from treatment-resistant paranoid schizophrenia. His symptoms included persecutory delusional beliefs, hallucinations, thought alienation and disturbed behaviour. The experts agreed that, had he not been experiencing symptoms of acute psychosis, he would not have perpetrated the acts. He was entirely driven by the psychotic process. All the medical experts agreed that a hospital order with restrictions was appropriate, and that a life sentence of imprisonment with a hospital and limitation order under Section 45A of the Mental Health Act 1983, known as a hybrid order, would not provide the public with the same level of public protection. The issue and the argument. The sole question for us was whether the sentences imposed are unduly lenient. This is a high hurdle. The court must ask whether the sentences fell outside the range of sentences which the judge, applying his mind to all the relevant factors, could reasonably consider appropriate. Whether, in other words, the judge below has fallen into gross error. The Solicitor General argues, 1, that the judge failed to reflect sufficiently the multiple aggravating features of the offending when arriving at an appropriate minimum term of imprisonment under a life sentence. Secondly, that the judge failed to take sufficient account, first, of evidence to the effect that the offender's culpability was not extinguished by his mental illness, and second, the extent of the harm caused. And thirdly, that the judge was wrong not to include a penal element in the sentence. It was submitted that the overall seriousness of the case required the imposition of a hybrid order. Our analysis. It is accepted by the Solicitor General that the judge made no error of principle in his approach, and that his choice was stark and binary, either hybrid orders or hospital and restrictions orders. The Solicitor General contends that the offender's criminality was aggravated by multiple features, including planning and the purchase of knives. However, the psychiatric evidence established that these actions were part of one psychotic episode of intense severity. The judge recognised that the offender's culpability was not extinguished, and that he had to consider whether a penal element was necessary. Because the offender's level of retained responsibility was low, and in circumstances where the offending would not have taken place but for the offender's schizophrenia, the judge was entitled to conclude that a penal element was unnecessary. this was so despite the number of victims and despite the extent of the harm caused. The schizophrenia was the sole identified cause of these crimes. So, for example, there was no evidence of substance abuse, no evidence of any culpable failure to take medication, or any motive for attacking these victims. The key factor in a case like this, when deciding whether or not a penal element is required, is the strength of the link between the offender's impairment and the offending in question. Here, at the time of the assaults, the offender was in the grip of a severe psychotic episode. The judge properly took into account the different regimes that would apply, depending on which of the two possible sentences was imposed. His conclusion that hospital orders with restrictions were appropriate was consistent with the principle that the graver the offence and the greater the risk to the public, the greater the emphasis that should be placed on the protection of the public. He reached the reasonable conclusion, based on the psychiatric evidence before him, that the aim of public protection would better be served by hospital with restrictions orders. In any event, the extreme violence perpetrated by the offender makes it very likely that, whichever of the two options had been adopted, the offender will spend the rest of his life in a secure hospital. Our conclusion. There was no error in the approach adopted by the judge. The sentences imposed were not arguably unduly lenient. Leave to refer the sentences is refused. It is impossible to read of the circumstances of this offending without the greatest possible sympathy for the victims of these terrible attacks and their families and their friends. The victim impact statements paint a graphic picture of the appalling effects of the offender's conduct.
So that is Baroness Carr. She's the Lady Chief Justice, to give her a formal title, passing their judgment on the Baldo Kalakani case. Remember, Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar, both at age 19, stabbed to death. She went to help her friend and was killed as a result. And the van driver, Ian Coates, who was 65, because of that sentence, they appealed, the Attorney General got involved because they thought there should be a whole life sentence for him. Because, of course, he's detained in hospital and there can't be whole life sentences.
Within a prison is what they wanted.
Yeah, they did.
Interesting there, listening to Baroness Carr talking about the fact that there was no evidence of substance abuse.
Yeah.
That came as a bit of a surprise to me, I have to say. That there was no evidence of any sort of mental illness before 2019. And that actually this acute psychotic episode of untreatable paranoid schizophrenia is what led to him carrying out those horrific acts.
And, of course, it's manslaughter, not murder. And yet, ironically, he was convicted of attempted murder when he drove Ian Coates' van into some passers-by. So he was convicted of attempted murder there, but not murdering those three people. I still am baffled by that judgment, I'm afraid. I was with the Attorney General and very much with the family, and they must be devastated. I mean, nothing brings them back, does it? But you can understand why they'd want him locked up in a prison and the key thrown away forever.
Yeah. OK, moving on now. A groundbreaking study has found that weight loss drugs like Ozempic can reduce the risk of heart attack and strokes by a fifth.
Cardiologists say these jabs are the most significant development in heart disease since statins in 1990, but does it come without risk? We're going to talk now to the journalist and friend of the show, Carol Malone, who's on Ozempic, and NHS GP Dr David Lloyd. Dr Lloyd, can we speak to you first? A lot of viewers are getting in touch and listeners getting in touch saying, well, I want Ozempic, but I can't get it on the NHS. What are the rules?
So the rules are, for an ordinary general practitioner, we can't prescribe Ozempic and its other drugs for obesity alone. We can only prescribe it for diabetes. And such is the demand for Ozempic that we've actually been given directions that we can only just start prescribing it again for our diabetics. So the huge demand that we've had for people with obesity around the world has really restricted the availability of semaglutide, which is the active ingredient, and other drugs like it. So yes, we're very much restricted.
So, Carol, did you manage to find Ozempic privately then? Is that, is that how you managed to get it?
Yeah, you can source it online, and you have to find a reputable company. The company that I use is called Juniper, and you buy the supplies online. You go through a process where you get interviewed, you get talked to, they talk to you about your weight, and then if they think you're suitable, then you're allotted the drug. I mean, it's an interesting. This study is incredible. It's the biggest study of its kind ever. It's 17,000 people, and it's a game changer. It's been described as a game changer by John Deanfield, who was one of the. This is for art, but the other.
I think we've
is
lost
that it
Carol.
helps people lose weight, and it has helped millions of people.
Dr. Lloyd, if we're just going to go to Dr. Lloyd. So, if the government accepts this study and that this can then be prescribed to help people with heart disease, is there going to be enough Ozempic in the world?
Well, perhaps can I just talk slightly technical just for a moment?
Sure.
So this study shows that there is a huge reduction in the amount of heart disease over the 3-year study, and that equates to, if you were to give Ozempic to 65 people, you would prevent 1 heart attack or stroke. Now, if you compare that to a statin, you need to give 45 people a statin to prevent a heart attack or a stroke. So the rate at which these drugs affect the chance of getting a heart attack or a stroke are roughly the same, but statins do have the slight edge. Now, in this country at the moment, about 7 million people take a statin at the cost to the NHS of about £3 a month. If you do the calculation, we think that about 12 million people should be taking a statin every month, again at the cost of £3 a month. And so that will, if you multiply 61 in 65 by those 3 million, that will be the number of lives that we would save if everybody was on a statin who should be on it. Now, the cost of Ozempic is about £300 a month. Wow. So if we were to put everybody who needed a semaglutide on this drug, we would cost the country billions and billions of pounds. So it's a big decision already. I mean, I'm afraid I'm a very old GP, but when I first started, the drug bill on the NHS was about 4 or 5% of the total bill of the NHS. It is now 18%. So every time you get a new drug and you spend billions on it, you have to find the cuts elsewhere, which means doctors and nurses losing their jobs. So it is a hugely complicated equation, but there's no doubt at all these drugs are absolutely amazing, and clinically we've seen the weight loss you can achieve with diabetics, and you can get Ozempic on the NHS for weight loss if you are referred to a specialist weight clinic, and the benefits can be measured and accurately.
Yeah. And Carol, how is it?
I want to get over. I do want to get over this message. There are 4 million people in this country who should be on a statin, and they have very few side effects. The risk of side effects in a statin is less than 1%, but 20% of people who take Ozempic vomit.
There are some cardiologists who would say actually they don't feel the same way about statins at the moment.
Absolutely,
actually, they would like more emphasis on diet. And I just have to put the other side of that though, on diet and exercise.
Statins have been around for 40 years. They are infinitely safe.
Doctor, with respect, you are denigrating a drug that one of the top cardiologists in the country has just said cuts heart attacks by 20%, heart attacks and strokes.
I'm not denigrating it. I'm saying it's a fantastic advance. I'm saying it's a fantastic advance, and compared to statins, they are very similar.
But you don't sound like you're talking about like it's a fantastic advance.
Well, really? What am I trying to say? What do you think I'm trying to say?
It just sounds like you're saying everyone should take statins and not Ozempic.
We've run out of time, both of you. It's such a shame. We could have drilled down into that in a lot more detail. Carol Malone, of course, and NHS GP Dr David Lloyd. I'm so sorry we ran out of time, both of you.
Fascinating, isn't it, though? Because what the doctor has to accept is if Ozempic may cost a lot more money, but if it stops people having heart disease, that's going to save the NHS money.
Yeah, but, you know, some people are questioning the results of this study as well. One of those doctors, Dr Renee Hoendekamp, who's really looked at the results of this study, is going to be on the show later because she thinks this is only half the story, so you don't want to miss that. But still to come this morning, Common Sense Minister, as she's been tagged, Esther McVey, is bringing more common sense, apparently. Rainbow lanyards in the workplace. She'd like to see them banned. Find out why. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Meghan's launched her new lifestyle range, starting with jams. It's called American Riviera Orchard. Apparently, it's been made from organic fruits grown in Meghan and Harry's Montecito gardens. If we can believe it, I reserve an air of scepticism. But she sent out 50 jars of this jam to influencers and celebrity friends in the hope of trying to boost some sales to her product. But it's ended up winning for King Charles because fans have gone to Highgrove website and King Charles's jam has sold out.
So hang on, why did they go?
Has gone through the roof.
Why did they go to the Highgrove website?
Well, I think it's a bit of a blow against Meghan because they're saying we don't want your jam. We're going to go and get the king. So it just shows how popular the king is. This is what she's always wanted. Her dream has been to be like this Gwyneth Paltrow style lifestyle guru. She's always loved Gwyneth's website Goop. When she set up the TIG, which was her website when she was still in Suits as a working actress, that was the brand, the style of brand that she was going for, was this Gwyneth style, New York elite, very princessy. So this is her chance now by trying to cash in on her royal title because she is now a duchess. So she's using that to try and elevate her brand. And she's really now trying to carve out herself as this new Martha Stewart.
And she's coming out with a cooking show as well on Netflix. She's coming out with a cooking
show. And she's, I mean, to be fair to Meghan, she has always tried to say that she's into healthy eating, organic food, cooking. But I don't see this being a success. It just will not happen for her because she's just burnt too many bridges. People just don't believe in her brand. They don't think she's authentic. So are you an actress? Are you a guru? Are you a duchess? Are you a philanthropist?
Who are you, Meghan?
Who actually are you? This is what we're asking. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Meghan really knows who she is.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and, of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
27, Britain's Newsroom with GB News with Andrew Bismuth. We've got the panel with us, Nigel Nelson and Lord Colville Ranger in the studio. Gentlemen, you've just heard the reaction. The verdict against Kalakani stays the same. It's not being changed to murder, so he could potentially get a whole life sentence. What do you think?
I think that judges have to be left to do their job, and if they say that there was no error in sentencing in the first place, I think we take that in. It was the Attorney General who wanted this case to go...
As did the families, of course.
As did the families.
We're expecting them to react shortly to the verdict.
Yeah.
So you're content that it's the right...
Yes, I mean, all the judges were doing was saying that the original sentence was correct.
Yeah. Colbert?
I think this is where it does get difficult because, as Nigel says,
the judges are saying the original sentence is correct. Whether we feel and the families feel, it'll be interesting to hear what the families think about this.
Well, they'll be disappointed.
They'll be very disappointed.
The bit I struggle with, and I'm not a lawyer, but I struggle with manslaughter to diminish responsibility for killing those 3 people. But he was sentenced for attempted murder for driving the van, Ian's van, into 3 people. So why wasn't that diminished responsibility? I don't understand.
I wish I knew the law better, but I think it's each individual instance is judged separately.
Yeah.
And in that basis, those are the conclusions that they come up to.
We are expecting the families of Emma Webber, the mother of Barnaby Webber, to respond at some point, and we'll bring you that when we get back.
So, Esther McVey has announced, Nigel, a ban on political or kind of identity lanyards in the workplace.
In the civil service?
In the civil service alone.
Yes.
What's she trying to do here, do you think?
Well, I mean, but my first reaction when I heard it was, this is actually an attack on free expression. And then I heard what Esther McVey said and found I agree with her totally. So what she's trying to do is say, if you're a civil servant, you're meant to be neutral, you leave your politics behind at the door of your office. And so lanyards, any lanyards, whether it be a rainbow lanyard or a Palestinian one or whatever, that should not be worn. They should wear straightforward lanyards which actually say what the department is.
Yeah.
Although
She's also trying to cut down on the spending on diversity projects within the civil service, £27 million last year alone.
Well, these lanyards are very expensive. You know, we talk about lanyards, but actually, Bev, you made an interesting point. You said workplace. I've spent 25 years in industry, and I've seen the change in a workplace environment where, unless you are now, especially when you're a leader, demonstrating that you're aligned with all the various cohorts of people who are looking to be represented, you're supposed to be allies with various different groups. The civil service is meant to be neutral, I understand what we're saying there, but actually, what is it that you're meant to be bringing into a workplace? Yes, you can bring your authentic self, but does it have to be all on display and aligned with every single other person? And I think there is a really good common sense approach here that Esther is bang on, that we need to think about what is the purpose of what we are trying to do in any given environment. And then all the other things that we bring in, do they have to be there? Those are our personal things.
But a workplace environment outside the civil service is a different thing. I mean, the whole point about the civil service is that they are there to support the government of the day. They don't get involved in politics. That's a condition of their employment. The same thing won't apply if you work elsewhere. So I don't quite see extending a ban to other organisations is actually necessary. If the organisation itself says as a condition of employment, actually, you will not wear lanyards that don't have our company logo on, that's fine, but not to actually withdraw the right, which is what's happening in the civil service.
I didn't know lanyards advertising your politics or your kind of ecological credentials or who you like to sleep with was such a big thing in the civil service.
Well, it's a big thing everywhere.
Really?
The lanyard has become the item of, I think, this decade, if not more, that demonstrates more than anything else who you are and what you are. The power of a lanyard. It's not even the pass it's carrying. And I've seen this emerge over the last sort of 10 years. You know, it speaks to your belief, your sexuality, your activism, coupled with some badges on your lapels as well. And these relics are becoming so primary in any environment.
A report only yesterday, Colville, that one police force, I think it's in the West Midlands, has spent £24,000 in 1 year on freed from equality lanyards, badges, whistles. What a flipping waste of money when you never see a bobby on the beat.
And they should be neutral too.
Exactly,
they should not be wearing that. That's what I mean about there are certain groups that should be neutral, not show any kind of bias either way.
I don't know. I quite like to know what somebody feels really strongly about. I think it's better to know your enemy.
Actually, that's a really good point. That if
people do compelled to wear it and they don't want to wear it.
Well, that's another point, to look like you fit in. Yes, you've got to fit in. You have to wear, because there's a thing about being an ally, and if you're not an ally, are you against what I
it's
stand
off
for?
division everywhere. Right, gentlemen, sorry it was brief because we took that court hearing, but you'll be back in the next hour. Sam Francis is waiting for us with your news.
Very good morning to you. It's 10:33, and let's just get a quick roundup of that breaking news coming from the Court of Appeal this morning, where we've heard that 3 judges have ruled that the sentence of Nottingham killer Valdo Calacane was not unduly lenient. Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates were killed by Calacane last year. He was given an indefinite hospital order in January after admitting manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility. Lawyers had argued for a hybrid life sentence where he'd be treated for paranoid schizophrenia before then serving the rest of his term in prison. However, delivering the ruling moments ago at the Court of Appeal, the 3 judges said there was no error made when the original sentence was delivered. In other news, the rate of unemployment is at its highest level for nearly a year, while wage growth is unchanged at 6%. It's a blow to economists' hopes of easing inflation. The Bank of England wants to see falls before cutting interest rates. Shoppers will be told to back British produce as the Prime Minister prepares to address farmers later. Rishi Sunak's expected to tell farmers that the UK must reduce its reliance on fruit and vegetables from overseas. But Labour says the Conservatives have driven farmers to breaking point and they're promising a new deal to put money back in their pockets. And researchers are hailing new findings which suggest that weight loss jabs could have benefits beyond just shedding the pounds. A worldwide studies found that injections could also reduce the risk of heart attacks and strokes by a 1/5, even if the patients failed to lose weight. Doctors say the findings will challenge health authorities, which currently limit treatments to just 2 years. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. Another update at 11 o'clock. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And let's take a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2532 and €1.1617. The price of gold this morning is £1,873.28 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,424 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, the Court of Appeal has ruled that the sentence of Nottingham killer Valdo Calacane was not unduly lenient.
Yeah, he was given an indefinite hospital order for manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The family and the Attorney General were pressing for it to be convicted of murder, so he could then be potentially given a whole life sentence and never released from jail.
Yeah, we're expecting to hear from the families of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates, who were killed by Calacane, any moment now. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. The M9 in Stirling is partly blocked northbound by an accident between junctions 9 and 10 from Bannockburn to Craigforth, causing delays. On the M62 in Greater Manchester, the inside lanes closed eastbound after an accident between junctions 21 and 22 from Milnrow to Rishworth Moor. Slow towards there from junction 19. In Newport, the A48 is closed southbound off junction 24 of the M4 at the Coldra after an accident yesterday afternoon. In Gloucestershire, the A420 is closed each way off the A46 between Cold Ashton Roundabout and Marshfield after an accident. The M25 in Hertfordshire's partly blocked anti-clockwise, where a lorry's broken down after junction 25 for the A10 with queues from junction 27 for the M11. In Surrey, the A22 remains closed at Caterham after a fuel spill on Sunday. And in Devon, the A30 is partly blocked westbound by an accident between Fingal Glen and Cheriton Bishop, causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Organisations, plural, because there's loads of people doing this. The organisations are charging schools to be part of this odd league table about who's trying to outdo who when it comes to who is more trans-inclusive with the kids than the next person. There's something that makes me uneasy about this.
Supposing a child comes home and says, you know,
You know, you think, oh, I've done well today. He said, well, how have you done? He said, well, I was #1 painter, or I was #1 reader. No, I wasn't. I was made LGBT champion. You know, this is a 4- and 5-year-old. Look, I can understand this, actually, as we develop into the secondary school. I can understand more debates taking place. I cannot understand why we have to thrust it at young children. And I think if you ask the parents, they'd be hostile to it. And what about the role the teacher has to play in all this?
Society has been one way, the pendulum is swinging the other way, and they're pushing it very far in order to kind of proliferate change. And this is probably the toughest period in that evolutionary process, because the LGBTQ+ community is saying that you've got to really rage against the machine to get people to listen. Because put it like this now, even this conversation, the whole country is listening, the whole world is listening. These are the kinds of eyeballs and ears they haven't had before. And there's going to be friction. There's going to be a locking of heads in the process to getting to a point where you establish a new equilibrium where they feel more incorporated. Like I've said, the greatest force of allies that the LGBTQ+ community has always had is heterosexual women. What you're moving towards now is doing things that is beginning to turn them from allies into people who feel that, oh, for you to thrive, I'm being deprived, and that's a problem. When they realise you're alienating allies, they will understand you've got to recalibrate to have that kind of understanding between both parties.
So, are you going abroad for your summer holidays this year?
Yes.
Where are you going? Anywhere nice, Andrew?
South of France and to Romania.
Oh, that's controversial. Why are you going to Romania?
Looking at old castles. Going to see Transylvania.
Really?
Yeah. Some people say I might find my relatives there. That's unkind, isn't it? I just said it before she did, because I knew she was thinking of it. You see, she was about to say it, but I anticipated it.
You're going to Transylvania to find what?
No, they are amazing. It's an amazingly beautiful part of Romania.
A home of Dracula?
It's the home of Dracula. Well, Bram Stoker, it is fiction,
Saying
remember?
Nothing.
Well, actually, Vlad the Impaler was from Transylvania, and I think that's basically Dracula. But anyway, that's the point about this. Isn't my holiday arrangement? It's there could be bad news and travel cares because pilots at EasyJet have rejected a pay deal worth as much as £200,000. So could they be going on strike?
Joining us now is travel journalist Simon Calder, who can explain this to us in a little more detail. Good morning, Simon.
He'll have been to Transylvania already,
I bet
of course.
He's been to Transylvania. He's been everywhere. So let's just talk about this. What are EasyJet pilots so unhappy about? What are they being asked to do?
OK, and great to hear, by the way, that Andrew the Impaler is going to Romania. Fascinating country. Actually, the King has a real interest in the castles of Romania. Quite a little worth checking that out. And, of course, you've got the painted mirrors in out towards the Moldovan frontier. You're going to have a great time if you can get there. I can be pretty sure you're not flying on EasyJet because they stay well away from Romania. That's territory of Ryanair and Wizz Air. But yes, there's a lot of concern about what's happening with EasyJet pilots. We all, absolutely understandably, Bev, get really concerned at this time of year. We're looking forward to our holidays, and the last thing we want is strikes. We will get strikes, undoubtedly, but I am not too concerned about the EasyJet pilots. I do have forward bookings with EasyJet, but what's effectively happened is that the pilots union, BALPA, has been in talks with the airline, and they basically just said, right, we want substantial pay increases. They can do that partly because there is generally a pilot shortage, and as you probably will have seen, that could mean that somebody who's been a captain with EasyJet for 10 years gets £200,000 a year at the end of this. Anyway, the pilots say that's not enough. They know that they're in a pretty strong position in terms of their bargaining power. They also know that the worst thing, even a tiny bit of talk about strikes, is bad for airlines because it makes people think, oh, I was watching GB News, heard about a possible EasyJet strike, even though, and I must give you the statement from EasyJet where they say, absolutely, we are not expecting any change. Here we are disappointed that the pilot pay deal was narrowly rejected expected. We remain in constructive dialogue with BALPA. No strike action is planned. Now, I can say that, but other people are going to think, well, I'm not going to book with EasyJet, then I'll book with British Airways or Wizz Air or Ryanair or whoever. So it's damaging just being talked about. The pilots know that it's all part of the pressure to get a swift and generous settlement.
I mean, we know that airlines had a tough time from 2020 onwards, but I'm just looking at EasyJet's profits, which was for the year ending September 2023, and they had record profit before tax with £455 million. This is, yes, and EasyJet Holidays profits grew 221%, delivering £122 million profit before tax. So maybe the pilots have got a point.
Well, Bev, you've summed that up absolutely brilliantly. Yes, airlines were crushed during COVID, and now they are having the time of their lives. Partly, actually, that's because there aren't enough planes around. Now, there's no problem with EasyJet planes, but some other airlines, including Wizz Air, there's an issue with the engines, the Pratt & Whitney engines, which means that some of their aircraft are going to be grounded this summer. Boeing is having huge problems with its supplying Boeing 737 MAX aircraft because of the safety issues that we all know about. As a result of that, Ryanair aren't getting enough planes. As a result of that, there aren't enough seats to go around. And so we are all paying a fortune. So people like EasyJet, people like British Airways benefiting from that. The people who aren't benefiting are you, me and Andrew, who are saying how much? And paying hundreds of pounds. And of course, yes, to answer your question, the pilots are seeing how much are being made. Well, the reason they're making so much money is because we're very good at flying. Of course, EasyJet, the second safest airline in the world after Ryanair in terms of the number of passengers flown without fatality. So they've got a point, and they're going to be pressing that home. But if you want to worry about strikes, I'd probably say you can pretty much guarantee there will be more rail strikes this summer, and then French air traffic controllers aren't going anywhere. So watch out for those.
Oh, dear.
OK, brilliant. Thank you, Simon.
Always lovely to talk to you, Simon.
Great to see you.
Simon Calder, travel editor of The Independent. Up next, the Prime Minister says, or thinks, he can win over the farmers. They're in number 10 as we speak. It's a tractor outside with a bale of hay. Does that sound a bit staged to you?
A little bit staged, but anything that draws attention to the issue of the farmers, we are very much on board with. We're going to be talking to two of them after this quick break with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A dull and a damp day for many today, but it will be brighter compared to yesterday in parts of Wales and southwest England, and northern Scotland again doing OK for some warm sunshine here. But sunshine in short supply today over southern Scotland, northern and eastern parts of England, North Wales too, staying pretty dull and pretty damp throughout, maybe brightening up at times across the east coast of England. Much brighter compared to yesterday for Wales and southwest England, some sunny spells here, but possibility of one or two sharp showers. Feeling warmer here as well, but for most under the cloud and rain, feeling cooler. But northern Scotland, look at that, a bit of sunshine in the Moray Firth. Could see temperatures easily into the low 20s. The rain will continue to drift into parts of western Scotland, southern Scotland, the far north of England, staying pretty damp well into this evening. But further south, the rain should generally peter out. A few more showers milling into parts of Devon, Cornwall and Pembrokeshire. Quite a mild night again. Temperatures holding up 11 or 12 Celsius in towns and cities. On to Wednesday, and it could again be pretty drab over some eastern coastal counties of England. Grey here with rain and drizzle on and off. The Fret and the Har may return to eastern Scotland. It's a bit brighter over the Midlands, northwest England and southwest Scotland compared to today. Again, western Scotland seeing some good spells of sunshine. Just one or two scattered showers in the southwest. And in the sunny spells, feeling quite warm. Goodbye.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Camilla Tominey. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Rishi Sunak is hoping to win over the farmers that he's invited to Downing Street for the second UK Farm to Fork Summit today.
He's going to warn against an over-reliance on food imports, as just 55% of our vegetables and 17% of fruit bought in this country are grown here.
So joining us now are farmers Gareth Wyn-Jones and Kelly Seaton. Good morning, both of you. Good to see you again. Now, shouldn't you be at Downing Street, Kelly, first up?
Oh, it's invitation only. Unfortunately, I didn't get one.
Is that because you've been critical, Kelly, do you think, of the government?
Probably. I saw somebody who had been invited yesterday had posted on social media saying that they were very selective over who they were inviting. NFU had asked for this summit to take place every year, but Downing Street and DEFRA are in charge of who is invited. So I think that probably tells you what you need to know.
Gareth, what's your take on it? You're one of the most famous farmers in this country next to Jeremy Clarkson. You should surely be there.
I had 15 minutes with our Prime Minister earlier this year, and I told him a few home truths. Maybe that's why I don't get an invitation to these places. Look, we've got to start backing British agriculture. We've got to start getting behind, you know, the no farmers, no food. People have got to wake up and start to think that they can't go any single day of their life without a farmer. And governments have got to be propping this up and starting to understand if they're not going to be supporting, you know, our farming communities, they're not going to be there in the future to produce food. And especially with the spring we've had and the end of last winter, it's been a very, very difficult time. So, you know, we need a farming food revolution in this country. Let's build a better Britain on our bellies. Let's get the next generation understanding how important the farmer is. And let's get supermarkets giving us a fair price for what we're doing. We're working 7 days a week to produce food, and we get nothing but grief from governments, you know, from the environmentalists saying that we're destroying nature. And look where I'm standing.
I know.
Beautiful Wales,
Beautiful.
surrounded by trees and beautiful wildlife.
Let's bring Kelly in here. Kelly, would it help, a very simple thing, if you went to a supermarket? I was in my supermarket the other day and I thought, there's no labels here telling me where this broccoli is from or where these tomatoes are from. Shouldn't they make a big thing, the supermarkets, which are your biggest customer, about British labelling, making the point, buy British?
Yeah, I mean, they supposedly tried. They label a British food section. I think Co-op have committed to that. And is it Sainsbury's is the other supermarket that has committed to it? However, quite often you find under the big banner of British produce is non-British produce. And actually the biggest problem is that farmers aren't getting paid a fair price for their produce. We're very much run by the supermarket. So today, No Farmers, No Food campaign are encouraging you to snub the supermarket and go to your local supply, maybe a farm shop or wherever you can. Unfortunately, not everyone can afford to do that, but the supermarkets at the moment are playing the monopoly both ways. So the farmers aren't getting paid a fair price, but also the consumer is probably paying more to the supermarket, and that's where the profit is going, is in the supermarket pockets. Farmers traditionally are price takers, not price makers. You wouldn't ask a plumber to take a price. You would always, they would give you the price that they are going to give you. Supermarkets have very much taken the monopoly on that and put farmers in quite a difficult position, I feel.
Gareth, shouldn't Rishi Sunak be getting all the bosses of the supermarkets in his house to have a conversation about what they're doing? It's all very well for him to say, you know, we can't over-rely on food imports. Well, do something about it then.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, I agree with these labelling as well. You know, we've got the biggest supermarket in this country's got so many fake farms that they'll use to sell their produce, and this produce is coming from every country in the world. And, you know, if we don't step up and start to look at food security as the most important part of what we've got in this country, you know, if another war breaks out, because we are sleepwalking into food shortages, there's no doubt in my mind. This is going to happen sooner than later. And we're going to see, you know, price hikes in food going through the roof. And we're seeing it now in beef and lamb. And we've got to start to address that. We've got to look at new technology, new innovations of how we can produce food, start to be more energy sufficient as farmers. You know, government should be putting money towards solar panels on farming sheds so they can milk them cows at a cheaper rate so people can have it. You know, it's innovation, technology going forward to feed this nation in a sustainable, regenerative and environmentally friendly way. And if the supermarkets and the government aren't going to help with that, we can only ask the consumer and the customer to get out there and back British agriculture. Forget about government, forget about the supermarkets. Look for a farm shop, look for a butcher, find a farmer. A farmer's going to be your friend, and a farmer's going to be feeding you once, twice or 3 times a day. And don't forget that, because we're here for you. Yeah. And we want to do that affordably as well. That's really important. There's people on the breadline, you know, the cost of living crisis. We want to do it affordably. So we've got a lot of boxes to tick, but we're the people that can do it. But we have to have your support as the consumer and the customers.
Kelly, how useful is the Clarkson's Farm series in terms of raising awareness of the sort of hurdles that you guys have to jump over? The bureaucracy, the small-minded local authorities that seem to just want to suffocate the farming spirit. Is it good for you guys, that programme?
Absolutely. I mean, my children have got a reminder so that they can watch all the episodes, probably on repeat. It's great for all generations, from obviously not too young because of the swearing, but for all generations and all walks of life. Everyone that you speak to will say, have you seen the latest Clarkson's Farm, whether that's our milk tanker driver, whether that's our contractor, whether that's general public. We've got a canal that comes through the middle of our farm, so quite often we have general public walking through. And they will all say, have you seen Clarkson's Farm? I had no idea what you have to go through.
And part of the thing these farmers you're objecting to, as I understand it, Kelly, is this determination to make you all more environmentally friendly. So they're going to force you to give up some land and plant trees, and they call it rewilding. I think that's the buzz phrase, isn't it? And wildflowers, which is going to eat into your profits even more.
Well, funnily enough, that's actually mostly in Wales, although who knows what happens when the next government gets in. But a lot of farmers are facing the predicament now where they can make more money from the subsidies for rewilding, planting trees, and not actually farming. So when you look at food security, you're massively reducing our food security by incentivising farmers not to farm, whether that be they're putting solar farms in, or whether they are just using the subsidies because that's the only way they can make a living.
Well, I'm interested, Gareth, how this all happened, how we got to this place. Because, of course, when the supermarkets first came along, presumably they were a gift to farmers because suddenly there were vast amounts of produce that you could grow and sell to these behemoths of commercial enterprise. How did it then flip so that you felt like you were the victim of that system?
They've got a stranglehold on agriculture. That's the thing, and people forget it. You know, they're able to do 2 for the price of 1. And if you think the supermarket's paying for the 2 for the price of 1, you've got another thing coming. You know, they've got milk on the shelves, which is cheaper than water. and cost of production, it's absolutely wrong what they've done, and they've forced that price down, and it's always the farmer. You know, they're making massive profits. We're looking at their profits every year. It's the same with these big companies, but it's the working people. And food's affordable because the farmer's put in 7 days a week, 365 days a year, so it can be affordable. But the average age of a farmer now is 65 and rising. Now, how long can that last? How long can that keep going? Well, it's not going to last. And the next generation's not coming through. So we have to have a fair price for what we're producing. And I don't want to be subsidised. I don't want money from the government for planting trees. I want a fair price for producing food. I've got plenty of trees, and I'll plant trees when I want, where I want. I'll plant hedgerows as well. You know, this area, the Carneddau and North Wales and Snowdonia, Eryri, is a fantastic place for wildlife, for tourism, for agriculture, for my, you know, culture, Welsh language. We need to protect the next generation here. And governments in Westminster and here in the Assembly aren't doing it. We are like third-class citizens. We are trodden on. We are never, ever looked up to. You know, people don't recognise a farmer. You know, they're always blaming a farmer. Watch any mainstream television programme on the BBC or ITV, they'll always be pointing a finger. You know, they're talking about polluting the rivers when they don't even ask the sewage companies how much poop they're pouring into it. It's always the farmer with the chickens or the pigs or the dairy. It needs to change, you know. Things need to change. No farmers, no food.
Just very quickly, Kelly, you've got young children. Do you hope that they'll carry on the farming tradition, or are you worried that you could be the last?
It would be nice if they carried on, but if I'm honest, I'm not sure I want the life for them. It's a great lifestyle for bringing children up, but is it a great lifestyle for farmers? There's a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of stress.
OK,
Very
Kelly
sad.
Seaton, Gareth Wynne-Jones, great to see you.
Very best of luck to you.
Again, we wish you
Buy
best
British,
of luck.
and it reminds me why I use my greengrocer.
Buy British every time. But the trouble is, you go into the supermarket and you won't have a choice often. We've got so used to having fruit, particularly out of season, that, you know, if you go, well, the kids would like some strawberries with breakfast.
You can't have them in December.
You can have them if you buy them from Morocco, or you can have your blueberries if you buy them from Egypt. I don't want to do that, but I also want my kids to eat nutritious...
But you can see why they weren't at that summit, because they might say uncomfortable truths for the Prime Minister and the Agriculture Secretary. Who is the Agriculture Secretary? I can't even think.
Don't know at the moment, actually.
Listen,
we're going to go back to the Court of Appeal. This is the reaction to the judges, as you heard earlier, refusing to change the sentence of the Nottingham killer. Here we go.
This is disappointing, but not unexpected. The Nottingham attacks were entirely preventable. The Nottinghamshire police failed to execute a warrant for many months. A flawed investigation, no toxicology, over-reliance on psychiatric report. Leicestershire police failed to arrest Valdo Calacane. This is a failure of two police forces. A failure of the Mental Health Trust, along with Nottinghamshire Council as well. Missed multiple opportunities to prevent the Nottingham attacks and the murder of our children and Ian Coates is what has led us here today. We will continue to pursue agencies that failed us and hold them responsible for the Nottingham attacks, so that no other family is made to suffer like ours. We thank everyone for the outpouring of support for our brave and beautiful daughter, Grace. Thank you. Please, that's all I'll be saying.
And quite
Devastating
interesting,
reaction.
he's refusing to take questions too.
Yeah.
Because it's very distressing.
To tell you who that was Dr. Sanjoy Kumar. That's the father of Grace Amali Kumar, the beautiful young girl who lost her life in Nottingham, of course.
And she lost her life
devastated.
fighting to protect her friend.
Barnaby Webber.
Barnaby Webber.
And as the father said there was no toxicology report. He said it was a failure of 2 police services, and he said it's an over-reliance on psychiatric diagnosis. Let's talk to our reporter, Ray Addison, who is outside the court. Morning, Ray.
Yes, good morning to you both. Well, as we know, High Court judges reviewing the sentence of triple killer Valdo Callocane have ruled that there was no error of judgment in the trial judge's sentence and that it was not unduly lenient. Now, that was the ruling of Lady Chief Justice Baroness Carr, Lord Justice Edis and Mr Justice Garnham. Now, it followed a bid by the Attorney General, Victoria Prentice, to change what she believes is Callocane's unduly lenient sentence. Of course, in January, the 32-year-old was handed an indefinite hospital order under sections 37 and 41 of the Mental Health Act for the manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility of students Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar. Now, they were both 19. They were walking home from a night out in Nottingham. Also, 65-year-old school caretaker Ian Coates, who was on his way to work as well. All of this took place in the early hours of June the 13th last year. Now, Callocane also stole Ian Coates' van and drove 3 other people as well. Now, the Attorney General referred this sentence to the Court of Appeal, arguing that Callocane should be given something called a hybrid life sentence instead. Now, what that would mean, if they'd agreed, if the justices had agreed, is that he would serve his sentence in the psychiatric hospital where he is until he is deemed to be fit to then go and serve the remainder of the sentence in a normal prison. Now, lawyers for the Attorney General had argued that Callocane's extreme crimes warranted a sentence with an element of punishment. Now, in explaining the decision of the justices, Baroness Carr said that Callocane had no previous convictions, had struggled with his mental health since 2019, and that all of the experts in that original trial had agreed that at the time of the assaults, Callocane had been in the grip of a severe psychiatric episode. Baroness Carr said as well that the court could not ignore that medical evidence and that the judge in Callocane's trial was entitled to conclude that a penal element was therefore unnecessary, despite, she said, the high number of victims. And she did point out that the original judge and, of course, these justices in the review as well concluded that it is very likely, extremely likely, that Callocane will spend the rest of his life in prison. Now, Callocane attended the ruling via video link from Ashworth Hospital. That's a high-security psychiatric hospital close to Liverpool. He remained silent throughout, and in fact, he did not even speak to confirm his name. As we heard there, the parents of Grace O'Malley Kumar, the father of Grace O'Malley Kumar, Dr. Sanjoy Kumar, spoke after the ruling. He said it was disappointing but not unexpected. He said that the attacks in Nottingham that morning were entirely preventable and that it was a failure of 2 police forces and of the Mental Health Trust as well there. He said that police and mental health had missed multiple opportunities and that the family intends to continue to pursue agencies that they believe have failed them. Now, Emma Webber as well, the mother of Barnaby Webber, has issued a statement today saying today's ruling comes as no surprise. It proves how utterly flawed and under-resourced the criminal justice system in the UK is. It also illustrates the need for urgent reforms in the UK homicide law.
Is there anything else the family can do? Is that the legal recourse on the sentence closed down now?
Well, with that review, it would appear that we have come to a full stop. Obviously, the father there pointing out, of Grace O'Malley Kumar, pointing out that they are going to continue to pursue the agencies, and that seems to be the direction that the family, certainly of Grace O'Malley Kumar, want to go for Nottinghamshire Police, Leicestershire Police as well. Targeting them specifically for any failings that they feel that they have made. Also the local mental health trust too, to try and prevent, certainly try and prevent for the future any further instances where attacks like this could have been prevented.
All right, that's Ray Addison outside the High Court. I feel desperate for the families, you know. They may feel really let down that the system, yet again, is on the side of the killer.
Oh, it's miserable, isn't it? A lot of you getting in touch at home, just expressing your despair, really. Michael, these judges are out of touch with the real world. Terry says whether this man is mentally ill or not, 3 people are dead, 3 families grieving for their lost lives. Even a mentally ill person capable of such murder is not fit to walk across humanity, whether in
no toxicology test. I mean, was he on an illegal drug?
But this is what...
Was he high on cocaine?
But you see, this is the thing. The judge said there was no evidence of any substance abuse, but then the father has come out and said they didn't take a toxicology report.
Extraordinary.
So,
because they decided he was having a psychotic episode.
But that's the kind of failure of the policing and the investigation, which is the sort of thing that would leave you awake at night as a bereaved parent.
Yeah, and the hybrid life sentence would have meant when he's judged to have got a bit better in this hospital, which will be a lot cushier than a prison, of course, he could spend his sentence in a prison, but and they say it's likely he'll stay in prison. Likely isn't the same as a whole life sentence. Yeah. And I think it's shameful.
Right, let's go back to this Ozempic story now, because of course a lot of people are getting very excited about it, that it will help heart attacks, strokes and other weight-associated conditions. But GP and medical writer René Hoendekamp, who you'll know from this channel, is with us now. And René, you don't quite share this enthusiasm, do you? What is the data actually telling us?
Yeah, I mean, we must remember, first of all, that this is actually first published in November 23 and is a rehash of the data today and hasn't yet been published. It's been presented at a conference. The data has been funded by Novo Nordisk, who makes the drug, and all of the researchers are also funded by it. And lots of the doctors who are out today saying it's wonderful are also funded by Novo. So we mustn't forget that. Now, this went over 3 years and 4 months. It was 17,000 people. It was an RCT, which is gold standard. And it had an end point of death by a heart attack or stroke, or a non-fatal heart attack or stroke. And it found that in the treatment arm, 6.5% of people had the end point, heart attack or stroke. And in the placebo arm, only 8.2. So this is not a fifth reduction. That in itself is not true. It's actually about a 1% reduction. When you then realise that 6% of the people in the treatment arm withdrew from the trial because of side effects and adverse events, and 8% in the placebo, you have to ask yourself, are the people that would have gone on to have heart attacks or strokes actually the people that withdrew because they had more side effects? So this is a completely flawed study. So then you ask the authors, can we look at your data? And they said no. So it's paid for by the drug company. You're not allowed to look at the data. It's not a fifth reduction. And there were a lot of people who couldn't continue the trial. But what we've got here, Bev, once again, is on every single front page of a newspaper today, people are being told that they're going to, if they take this drug for life, they won't have heart attacks, even if they don't have diabetes. And there is a collusion between big pharma and media to sell this to the public, who will run forward to their GP and ask for the drug.
Well, just so, Rennie, it's very interesting there. This study is funded by who exactly?
By Novo Nordisk, who make semaglutide.
Who make Ozempic?
Yeah, well, they make semaglutide, which was actually the drug that was under comparison here, and that is actually the ingredient of Ozempic and Wegovy and some others that are coming.
So semaglutide is the active ingredient, effectively, in this drug. And just to explain, because we haven't said this, what does it do to help you lose weight? What is the mechanism of action?
So it interferes with pathways in your brain that actually tell you when you're full or not. So people taking it no longer feel so hungry, so they eat less. The problem with that, Bev, is at the moment you stop taking it, you feel hungry again and you put the weight on. So most doctors who are out there championing this accept that it is a drug that you will have to stay on for life.
A lot of people don't overeat because they're hungry, though. They overeat for all sorts of emotional reasons, comfort eating, sometimes just boredom. Does it help that as well? Do you actually feel full, that you can't eat anymore?
You do. You feel full because it slows down your gastric emptying. So you're not going to the loo quite so much, although most people will get diarrhea and vomiting when they start taking it. But ultimately, the idea is that you feel fuller and you're not hungry. And that says to us that actually, when you eat less food, you lose weight.
But Rennie, of course, if you take the drug and it does cut people's obesity levels, that long-term is better for the NHS when you consider what obesity is now costing the NHS. Isn't it the worst, the most expensive treatment they have to treat? It's worse than cigarette smoking now, I think.
It is. It's about 19 billion a year, Andrew. However, we don't really know that yet because there's no long-term data on this particular drug. And there are some pretty horrible side effects. So about 1 in 100 people will get pancreatitis. Now, when you get pancreatitis, your risk of pancreatic cancer is increased for about 3 years after that event. Pancreatic cancer is very expensive to the NHS, but also kills you. Kills you very quickly because it's very silent. A lot of people get hair loss. There's now reports of psychosis. So it's affecting suicidality and mood. There are people that are losing so much weight, they're losing their muscle mass. There's gastrointestinal effects. There are so many side effects that we just don't know how those will play out in the long term. And let's not forget, every single person on this trial over the age of 45 was already obese or overweight. If they had actually not got to that point, they wouldn't have any of these things that the NHS is now dealing with. And when you look at the report that was out yesterday about childbirth trauma, we are missing 2,500 midwives in this country. As a result, babies are dying, women are suffering intolerable trauma in their what should be the happiest moment of their life. Should we be spending our money in the NHS on something which can be controlled by responsibility and actions that you take in life? Or should we be spending it on making childbirth safer for women, for example?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when this Ozempic story first broke, I remember being on the telly and saying, we've just given up now on helping people to lose weight or encouraging people to take personal responsibility. And yet, 6 months later, we're not having that conversation anymore. We very quickly get conditioned, don't we, unless we stop and go, hang on a minute, this drug might be the silver bullet that we've all been looking for. You can just lose all the weight, because people do struggle and it is complicated, and I do sympathise.
But I do too, Bev. I do. And I agree with you. And we are in an obesogenic society. But what we've got here is we need to put this money into, and government policy into, stopping almost 80% of a lot of people's diet being ultra-processed food. Because ultra-processed food is making people fat. Yeah. Big food benefiting from that, and then Big Pharma are stepping in to make them not fat. We need to actually get people back to understanding where food comes from, understanding how to cook it, understanding what happens when you put lots of additives in and why that is no good for them. We need to get back to educating people about self-help, and the body is a wonderful thing if you look after it.
Yeah, Renee, thank you so much. What a fabulous dose of balance.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And fascinating that the drug company behind the major ingredient, Ozempic, funded the study.
Most drugs out there are funded. Their studies are funded by the drug companies who want to find a solution which is going to make them a huge amount of profits. So I'm getting to the point now when you just think, the state is not going to look after you. The NHS is not really working. If you want to be fit and healthy, you've just got to take responsibility for yourself. I know. Nobody else is going to do
your steps, do some press-ups.
Drink your water.
Eat an apple.
Get out and about and just, you know, have...
And no more digestive biscuits for you.
We do like a digestive biscuit in the morning. And I know it's not easy, it's difficult. But nobody else is going to do it for you. That's kind of all we've got to remember. Not even an injection.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, coming up, this is a really interesting story, and I think it's got people in the trade legs. Could Harry and Meghan's Archwell Foundation, that's their charity in America, be suspended over tax issues?
Yeah, we'll tell you all about it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry, remember him? He appears to have fully turned his back on the UK as he listed his primary residence as the United States for the very first time in papers published yesterday. So, interestingly, Harry listed the date on the formal US residency forms as the 29th of June 2023, last year. So that was the very same day he was kicked out of Frogmore Cottage in Great Windsor Park by his dad, the King. Charlotte, thank you for joining me. Okay. Are we just putting two and two together here with the significance of this date? Because there were stories during the rounds today that Harry chose that date specifically because he was so hurt about being booted out of Frogmore by his dad.
Yeah, I mean, to me it feels like he's trolling his dad a bit, because he could have said that he's been a US resident since 2020 when he quit the UK and moved to the States, but instead he chose the exact day that his dad kicked him out of Frogmore. But the reason his dad kicked him out of Frogmore was because he'd slagged off Camilla in Spare. And, you know, and his dad, apparently it was a really difficult decision for Charles, because, of course, no dad wants to kick their son out of their home. But he went beyond the pale. So Charles took the difficult decision to say, look, Frogmore's been empty for years anyway. We've spent £2.4 million doing it up for you. And now you've, you know, insulted our family in your book, Spare. Why is he so hung up on Frogmore? Because this is the country he was desperate to get away from. This is a house he didn't particularly want to live in and, in fact, didn't live in.
Well, he was forced, by the way, to pay £2.5 million to fund the renovations after it all kicked off. I mean, would that have anything to do with...
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that sort of galvanised his anger towards the whole situation. He thought he was getting a fantastic freebie. And there was, you know, there were a few reports at the time that Meghan actually thought she was moving into Frogmore House, which is a much grander property. And she sort of felt a bit sort of tricked or confused and hadn't quite realised it was actually a cottage, which is only a mere, I think it was only a mere 8 bedrooms.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. The studio are Nigel Nelson and Lord Colville Ranger with us. Right, what do we want to go to first, fellas? What about Rishi Sunak saying it's better the devil you know? Is that all he's got, Colville? Vote for me, I'm better because you know me.
Well, I'd like to hope there's more to come from the Prime Minister, and I'm sure there is more to come from the Prime Minister in the coming months as we lead up to a general election. But I think what he was trying to do yesterday is move on from the local elections and really start setting out the motivational reason for people to vote Conservative at the next election, which is really what was sort of missing and was felt missing in the local elections. I think he's got to look at where this conversation was about highlighting the weaknesses of Labour. And that's always been a case where the Conservatives, the party that the voters look to for defence of the realm, for supporting our armed forces, for making sure that we have strength in that area, considering all the global challenges that we see at the moment, he's saying the Conservatives should be trusted on that. But I think this is going to be a start of a number of these set-piece conversations that you'll see from probably him as the Conservative Party leader and other cabinet members setting out their stall as we run up to the election.
Quite a dull speech.
Well,
I'm afraid it was.
I read the sketch of it, actually, the legend that is Quinton Letts, and he was sort of highlighting bluebells and other things flying around because he probably was distracted.
Yeah. And it was so long. They witter on for 40 minutes.
Yes,
you lose the room after 15.
Well, it's a good point, leave them wanting more, Andrew?
I think so. Don't you think? I mean, they're all as bad, these leaders.
Yes, they are, but I mean, this particular one, it was just sort of a word salad which was stating the obvious.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, there are big bad wolves out there, I'm the woodcutter who will come and save you, was the kind of message. And then the attacks on Labour, I mean, he seems to think that defence is a good one to attack Labour on. The point really is that he's talking about spending 2.5% for NATO, on our defence spending, to fund NATO. But what we really need is a proper strategic defence review. If what he was saying yesterday, that the threats are changing, that the threat from Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they're changed threats, what we need to look at is not spending just more money, but what you spend it on.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing that seems to be lacking. He's talking about, Labour won't spend the extra money.
Well, we're
it's not what they've said.
And we're getting a big speech later this morning from Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary. He's talking about 6 new warships.
I mean, if that is what we need to deal with the current threat, that's fine. But there's a whole host of things. Trident, for instance, we've got 4 Trident submarines, each one with the firepower of 8 Hiroshimas. Now, the question now is that still a practical way of defending this country, given where we are? Should we be spending money on more conventional forces, for instance? Is that the threat we're going to get from Russia?
But I think the issue here is, and I think you're going to hear more from the Conservatives about this, because they perceive a weakness for Labour here. Because we know that Keir Starmer has put this veneer of a more centrist Labour feel onto his party. But beneath that, there are still a lot of people who are there and supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, as was Keir Starmer. And I think the Conservative strategists will see this as a weakness, particularly where Corbyn's Labour was very anti-NATO, anti-defence spending. How does that play out? And any commitments that Labour are saying they will make to spending in defence are being positioned in advance of a strategic review. They want to do a review, so there are no commitments. They will do a review. I think that's where the public should be concerned.
Keir Starmer has
rejected
Corbynism totally. I mean, he's been quite clear about that. Secondly, the attacks on Corbyn are a misrepresentation of what he said. It goes back to things he said 3 years before he became leader. What he was talking about was where Rishi Sunak said, he wanted to scrap the army, didn't want us in NATO. What actually Corbyn said was that he'd like to see a world that was peaceful, where you didn't need an army.
Wouldn't we all, Nigel?
Yeah,
but I think this is the
peacenik.
point. We're not in that world right now. This is the exact point the Prime Minister was making yesterday. The world that we know it has become a much more dangerous place.
But the Corbyn thing was a wish list. It wasn't a call for unilateral disarmament. And there's no question that Keir Starmer would do that either. The question really is how best to defend Britain in the modern world, where things are changing.
I think, Nigel, what this debate is demonstrating to us is that we are going to hear a lot more about this. This will be clear blue water between the Tories and Labour around defence.
At the election?
I think it will. I think it will, as we see more challenges on the globe. So the party that says and is clear about their position on defence, the spending on defence, and how they want to deal with the challenges and threats that our nation faces, I think the electorate will be taking that more seriously.
Interesting.
Can we talk about this terrifying vote in Parliament last night, which basically has now put through that if an MP is arrested on suspicion of violent or sexual offence, they would be excluded from attending Parliament. Nigel, that just opens the way for so many people to bring down MPs maliciously and vindictively.
Well, I mean, certainly they can make allegations about MPs, but the question really is at what point do you suspend the MP from Parliament? This vote went through just on one vote, which was to say on the point of arrest, not on the point of charge.
It's outrageous.
Well, no, that's what would happen in the wider world, that if you were accused of a serious allegation in the workplace, you would be suspended. So what you're saying here is it doesn't mean the MP can't represent their constituents. They can carry on doing that. What they can't do is come into the precincts of Parliament. They can have a vote. They can get a proxy vote to go and do it. And also what this has done is codified what was going on anyway. But the trouble was some MPs were being told by their whips, stay away from Parliament while this allegation is being investigated.
Well, Andrew Rossendale, the Romford MP, 2 years he had to
There is a classic case, and he was totally innocent. No charges and totally innocent.
And he felt he could not do his job properly because, a lot of business is conducted in
That's right.
But you see ministers, you see
But there's a good example there, that he was treated differently from other MPs because the whips told him to stay away.
But now they all have to stay away.
Yes, they would. In the event that you have an allegation of violence or sex abuse, they would be suspended. But my point simply is that means everybody is treated the same, which they're not at the moment.
But if there are several hundred complaints against MPs, you could literally have an empty House of comments, Colvin. Make this make sense to me. I don't understand why MPs have voted for this.
I think
it applied to you as a Member of Parliament, because you're a Member of the House.
Yes, and I think there is the challenge between, obviously we want to keep people safe and take these things seriously, but as we talk, you know, the number of allegations where they're, and obviously the time this takes as well, but, you know, it's not just that people would be not allowed to do what they're trying to do, but the amount of time these investigations take, as with Andrew Rosendale, and then eventually working out that there's nothing behind it.
The thing is, as well, you are commonly arrested if it's an allegation of sexual assault, because that means the police can then look at your tech, your documents, the documents you might, or
disclosure.
Your disclosure, but they can't look at your technological devices unless they arrest you. So if somebody makes an allegation, you are arrested so that the police then have powers to look at your technology.
Yeah, but I mean, the police don't go out there and just arrest anybody. So they have to have some kind of reasonable evidence before they do the arrest. So
But that's what I'm saying. The bar for sexual offences is so very low, because that's why the police will want to look at what people have on their technology.
Yes, but I mean, the problem is that when it comes to rape, also the conviction rate is very low, that an awful lot of people get off. So we've changed it slightly so there's a presumption you believe the victim.
Complainant.
And I do think that's right. And also...
Complainant, not victim.
Complainant, I'm sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right.
See, but you see what you did there? And this is the problem. We automatically say victim because we now assume...
No, it's
that
complainant because we don't know they're a victim until after conviction. You're absolutely right.
You should be scared today.
Well, I think, you know, it's challenging, but it's a broader issue in society as well. I think where we're looking at...
And we're looking to these guys to set the example of innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
Just on the polar opposite.
And the balance is shifting the other way, and I think it has been moving the other way for quite some time, and we do have to be careful about where...
But why is charge any better? I mean, you're still innocent even if you're charged. You're only found guilty if you are convicted.
I think what we found, though, Nigel, is that as charged, the question of innocence in the view of public opinion becomes guilty.
Yeah.
And I think that is also a challenge for people.
But also, if an MP is suspended on the point of being arrested, it will be out there in the public domain immediately.
Yes, that's right.
And is that fair?
Yes, I think it is, because it would apply to everybody. At the moment, some names come out in the public domain. Andrew Rosendale, as you mentioned before, his name didn't come into the public domain until he put it there, and that was sometime after he'd been suspended.
Extraordinary that it didn't come out. I was amazed.
Well, in fact, that
it was all over the internet, by the way, Nigel.
It was,
all over the
but
internet.
as far as the mainstream press was concerned, there was an agreement that you would not put his name out there.
Right.
But some people have had their name out there immediately, some haven't. This is my point. It means it's fair to everybody.
Right. Interesting.
I think it's appalling.
What I think was quite significant,
an indication of...
it passed with one vote. Yes. The Labour defector, Natalie Elphicke, voted for this.
Interestingly, I wonder if she'd have voted for that a week ago.
Would she have voted for it a week ago? And when her own husband was convicted of sexual assault, an MP against 3 women, she rubbished his victims. And yet yesterday she was voting to have MPs barred from the proceedings.
But Jess Phillips,
it's hard to make
Labour
sense of
MP
it.
Jess Phillips has led the charge on this, and she said, it gives a message to victims that we won't act unless people are charged, which happens in less than 1% of cases. So do something about that, Jess Phillips. Do something about the terrible conviction rate when it comes to sexual offences. Who knows? Maybe when they're in government they will. But by the sounds, this is just going to lock up anybody that gets an accusation sent their way. Very briefly, we're going to go to the news, but do you think the Meghan Markle's charity is in trouble, Colville?
It looks like there's something about a cheque lost in the post, but I was more interested in when is a royal tour not a royal tour?
Oh, I know. We don't have time.
When you have an invitation to go...
I think it was a presidential tour.
It really
Part
was.
of her political campaign.
So the Archwell Foundation is in all sorts of trouble in America because they haven't basically done their accounting.
They can't raise money or spend money, so that's the end of that charity.
Yeah, we're going to deal with that tomorrow morning, aren't we? Right, thank you, Nigel, as well. Thank you both. Right, Sam Francis is here with the news.
Very good morning to you. It's 11:31. A recap of the headlines this morning. The Court of Appeal has refused to change the sentence of a man who killed 3 people in Nottingham last year. Valdo Calacane was convicted of killing Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates, and for the attempted murder of 3 others. Lawyers had argued Calocaine's indefinite hospital order as a result of his paranoid schizophrenia was, they said, unduly lenient. But delivering the decision earlier this morning, Baroness Carr said there was no error made when the original sentence was delivered. The Foreign Secretary has summoned the Chinese ambassador after 3 men were charged for allegedly assisting Hong Kong's intelligence service. A spokesperson for the Foreign Office said that recent patterns of behaviour by China against Britain, including cyber attacks and reports of espionage, are not acceptable. Shoppers will be told to back British produce as the Prime Minister prepares to address farmers this afternoon. Rishi Sunak will say Britain must reduce its reliance on fruit and vegetables from overseas as he announces the first UK Food Security Index, which will monitor production, land use and input costs. Labour, though, says the Conservatives have driven farmers to breaking point and have pledged a new deal they say will put money back in farmers' pockets. And the rate of unemployment is at its highest level for nearly a year, while wage growth is unchanged at 6%. There were 26,000 fewer job vacancies in the 3 months to April, while the number of people in work dropped by 85,000. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, struck an optimistic tone this morning, saying that wages are outstripping inflation. But it could be an unhelpful sign for those hoping for a cut in interest rates. That's the latest from the newsroom. Another update at midday. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And let's take a look at the markets this morning. The pound will buy you $1.2549 and €1.1627. The price of gold is £1,870 and 6 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,420 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon, they're here. Good afternoon, Britain. Tom and Emily. What are you doing?
We're here.
We're here, but we'll also be here from 12 till 3. At 1:30 today, Keir Starmer is having a bit of a showdown with union bosses.
Yeah, right.
This is all about some accusations that the Labour Party is undoing what they called their New Deal for working people, all sorts of regulations on businesses to make...
All going to happen within 100 days, Tom, wasn't it?
Well,
the Labour government?
Originally, it was all going to happen within 100 days, and this was going to include the right for no one to email you after 5 o'clock and all these sorts of things that are clearly so very vital for the health and safety of people across the country. Well, apparently they've realised quite how silly some of these things were and are now rowing back. But these were pledges that were made to the unions in return for their backing. And so the unions are very, very unhappy. So there could be a bit of a showdown this afternoon.
Yes, it could be. Could be a bit of fisticuffs.
Yeah, I doubt it.
It could get a bit angry.
Remember who pays the Labour Party's bills?
A lot of these union bosses are quite aggressive people. They won't take too much lying down, will they?
This is a blow for Angela Rayner, because this is her package of workers'
rights.
rights.
I was there in Liverpool last year when she was sort of promising all of this and announced it and said, look, this is the deal. We do this for you and you get out there and you knock on the doors for us. It's the quid pro quo of union support. But it seems that there's been some jiggery-pokery behind the scenes, although perhaps we're overstating it, because the one crucial element of this that perhaps is the most pernicious for ordinary working people, that still remains, which is repealing all of the new democratic reforms that were made to strike law. So the coalition came in, and in 2015 this was strengthened, that you needed an absolute majority of union members to vote for a strike. The New Deal for Working People, Labour's new plan, would repeal that. So you didn't need a majority of union members to vote for a strike, so strikes could go forward with a minority of people voting for them.
Outrageous.
Yes, but it's very interesting because a lot of people on the left of the party are going to be very angry if it is seen to be watered down too much, including the union bosses, of course. But what do you make of this one as well? MPs arrested, but not charged or convicted, banned from Parliament. I think this is quite worrying because someone can make an accusation so that an MP is booted out of Parliament.
And MPs, more than most, are susceptible to those sort of malicious allegations.
Right,
We're going to have a debate
we
on
need
it.
to wrap it up. Emily and Tom will be here from midday until 3. Don't go anywhere, though. Quick break. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
What do you think of Sophie of Edinburgh? You know, how has she accounted for herself? How's she coming across? And has she been anointed by Charles?
Well, first of all, I just want to confirm that I'm your favourite Schofield, because that was alarming to me to see that Kevin Schofield was also appearing on the programme.
Well, it's an awful name for me, believe me. You know.
David, all right. Well,
never
I
even
do
think of you like that. You're just Kinsey to me.
I'm having a coughing fit now. That's wonderful.
Excuse me.
I think Sophie has been coined the royal family's secret weapon as of late. Her path was not the easiest one, but she's living proof that patience is a virtue, and if you work hard and stay focused, your time to shine will come. You know, she was under immediate scrutiny when she hit the scene because she was a self-made career woman, a young woman who was incredibly successful. She was a commoner. And, you know, she looked so similar to Princess Diana when she was younger. So they were constantly pit against each other when it came to beauty and fashion. You know, she tried and failed the half in, half out route. But unlike, you know, who, she ultimately chose the family. And despite some of that chaos, she was rewarded for her loyalty. So absolutely, I think that the king very much believes in the Duchess of Edinburgh, is so grateful for her contribution, and we saw real leadership with her today.
Interesting, Kinsey, to see that she actually bumped the Prince and Princess of Wales off the front of some of the newspapers this morning. She made it onto the front of the Telegraph, whereas it was the brand new picture that we haven't seen to mark their wedding anniversary that's made it onto the front of the Times. And I suppose that shows, you know, how significant that visit is and how prominent she's becoming.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 11:39. Let's cross live now to the Sea Power Conference in central London, where Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is speaking.
Goody goodies.
And when I met with the ship's company aboard HMS Diamond in the Red Sea in January, I was able to thank them for their commitment, their courage and their professionalism, and for everything that they're doing to protect freedom of navigation and therefore prices and shops at home. And speaking to them, I reflected on the absolutely essential role of our Royal Navy in our national security, in the world order, and in our broader way of life. Now, the situation that unfolded in the Red and in the Black Seas has challenged some of our long-held assumptions. But it's also confirmed the path that we're taking to modernise our Royal Navy and know that that is the right thing to do. And today, I want to explore both sides of that same coin. Now, not long ago, big states with big navies dominated maritime security. However, with almost 30% of Russia's Black Sea fleet either damaged or destroyed, and the rest cowering out of reach of Ukraine's ghost fleets of missiles and drones, and with the Houthis primarily using inexpensive drones to place a chokehold on global trade worth around $1 trillion a day, it is clear, very clear, that we are operating in a new military age. And so the question we must ask ourselves is, how do we ensure we don't find ourselves on the back foot in any future naval conflict, just as Russia has in the Black Sea? But also, how do we retain freedom of navigation when under attack by those hell-bent on holding global shipping lanes hostage? Well, part of the answer resides in recent decisions made by the government to help overcome these challenges. In particular, our move to a quicker, much more agile pan-defence procurement model, and our decision to ring-fence at least 5% of our defence budget for R&D over the next few years. These steps will help to deliver the technological edge we need in the years ahead, such as the Dragonfire laser, which we've said will now be delivered 5 years ahead of schedule in 2027, helping us preserve our naval strength and capability, not just in times of peace, but also in times of tension and times of war. Now, of course, chief among our capabilities is our continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent, now in its 55th year of unceasing operation, making the Royal Navy the cornerstone of our national defences and of our national security. To protect that legacy, we're investing up to £41 billion in our next-generation dreadnought fleet and making good progress with our UK nuclear replacement warheads, and thanks to Maddie. Meanwhile, our astute class of conventionally armed, nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines continue to roll off the production lines, with 5 now complete and able to hit threats on land with Tomahawk cruise missiles and threats below water with the Spearfish torpedoes. I had the pleasure to tour HMS Astute in Scotland last Thursday and heard about how the best-in-class weapons capability will be used. But last month, in March, I was also in Australia, seeing how we're making significant progress in our partnership with the next-generation attack submarine SSN AUKUS. And it's great to have our friends here from Australia today. All of which brings me to the second lesson from events in the Red and the Black Seas, the importance of alliances with like-minded partners. And in terms of naval alliances, I believe we're more integrated with a wider range of global partners than ever before. In Europe,
Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, making what's been billed as a major speech. We understand he's going to announce money for 6 new warships. I don't think that he'll be around as Defence Secretary when those warships work starts on them. Why do they not just get to the point of these speeches?
Oh, they love the sound of their own voices, don't they?
The preamble goes on and on
and on.
Well,
let's go live to our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Now, Mark.
He is coming.
Good
there he
morning
is.
to you. Yes, as far as Grant Shapps is concerned, he does believe that we are entering a golden era of shipbuilding for the Navy, and it's true that there are 28 ships either currently being built or being planned to be built over the coming years. But that doesn't really detract from the very serious situation that the Royal Navy is in. It's suffering a recruitment crisis. It's had decades of being hollowed out by successive governments, whatever the current spending commitments might be. That will take a long time to sort that. And just today, as Grant Shapps is announcing that there will be 6 new assault ships effectively for the Royal Navy, for the Marines. They were planned long ago, so he's confirming that they will indeed go ahead. They're announcing that 2 of the workhorses of the Royal Navy, the Type 23 frigates, another 2 of them are being retired, and that's going to leave a capability gap in terms of the frigates that we have, well below 9. They're supposed to be at 13, and it will be some years yet before the new batch of frigates comes into being. So there are some serious questions still for the Royal Navy, despite the good news today.
Thank you, Mark. Mark White there, as Grant Shapps continues to talk on and on and on.
We should have about how many minutes do you think it'll be? I think it'll be 42 minutes of speech. Prime Minister suggested it was 45. We didn't take all of it.
No, good. Right, still to come.
He might still be talking.
Should we ban smartphones for the under-16s? Is there any harm in them for kids? Well, Tory MP Miriam Cates will be with us on that. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. A cooler and cloudier day for most of us today, with rain for many, although the rain does tend to become more showery as the day and the week progresses. Low pressure is in charge at the moment. That's anchored to the southwest. It's bringing quite a blustery breeze into the southwest, along with a mix of bright spells and showers for Wales, southwest England, Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, this frontal system will linger across western Scotland into southern Scotland, northern and eastern England through the day, bringing outbreaks of rain. The rain on and off at times, but it's going to be cloudy, cooler and damp in these areas, certainly a marked contrast compared with the last few days. One place where the spring warmth continues is the north of Scotland, where temperatures could peak into the low 20s in some sheltered spots. But for the vast majority, it is changeable as we go through the night, and there'll be a lot of cloud cover, further spells of rain in the east and the north, with showers into the southwest. Temperatures typically dipping to 12 or 13 Celsius. Northern Ireland could be a cooler spot as we start off Wednesday, 6 to 8 degrees here, but plenty of sunshine. And actually for Northern Ireland, for much of Scotland, away from the far south of Scotland, it's a sunny day. There'll be some bright weather towards the south and southwest as well, 1 or 2 showers, but across eastern and northern England, a lot of cloud and further outbreaks of rain.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
So is social media and mobile phones in general destroying a generation?
Well, the Tory MP Miriam Cates certainly thinks so, and she's led a debate this morning in Parliament to discuss the impact of smartphones on children.
Before that, let's talk about the MP's parliamentary ban that was voted on last night.
Miriam's with us now, I think.
Miriam is with us now, I think, isn't she? Sorry, Miriam. Let's start on the debate this morning. We might ask you in a moment about that vote last night as well. What happened in the debate? What were the main points that were raised?
Well, good morning. It was a very well-attended debate, some very compelling contributions for a whole wide range of MP. But I think the main point of it is that smartphones and social media are causing irreparable damage to childhood. Whatever measure you look at, whether it's increase in suicide, self-harm, rise in anxiety and depression, children feeling that their lives are lonely or not worth living, all these things have rocketed since smartphones and social media became widely adopted by children from kind of 2014 onwards. And it hasn't just happened in the UK, it has happened around the world. And we're now seeing the impact in this in children's mental health, in educational attainment, in all sorts of ways, and younger, with even small children now having their development held back by being glued to screens rather than experiencing the physical world as our brains are designed to be. And so I think there's growing consensus that more needs to be done by the government. Certainly if social media and smartphones were a drug, they would absolutely be withdrawn from the market. They've never been shown to be safe to children. They were never designed for children. And yet somehow how we're allowing these enormous tech companies constant access into our children's lives through the digital world. So there's a lot of consensus from MPs that much more needs to be done.
There are a lot of senior male MPs, if I can put it like that, and not enough young mother MPs who really know how bad this problem is. How are you going to overcome that? Perhaps you might describe it as an education gap.
Well, there were a lot of male MPs there, actually, and I think the main dividing line is the difference between those who have children, particularly teenagers, and those who don't. And I think for people who don't have teenagers, or whose teenagers are now grown up and perhaps my age, they just didn't experience the addiction and the problems associated with the virtual world. And I think, it's very difficult for us to imagine living in a world where our children walk down the streets and they could be accosted by thousands of people demanding intimate photos or telling them to end their own lives. But this is what's happening online. But if you're in your 50s and 60s, if you don't engage in those apps, it's quite hard to believe that this is real. But it is real, and it's damaging our children. And just like we wouldn't let children buy tobacco or drive a car, we shouldn't be letting them have unfettered access to a product that really is destroying their childhood.
So Miriam, do you have a solution? Would you have an age limit?
Yes, I think there's a wide range of solutions. I proposed 7 things that the government could do this morning. Firstly, we need to raise the age of social media from 13 to 16. We need to make sure that age verification works. So you can't just tick a box and say you're 16, but actually you're 12. I think there's a lot more that the tech companies need to do. We need to get a grip on internet pornography, because that is really harming particularly young boys, but also having an effect on young girls. There's a wide range of things that the government could do. But I think if we think back to COVID, the government passed a huge piece of legislation in just 24 hours. So how can anybody say that we can't do something in the last 6 months of Parliament that will seriously rescue our children?
Quite. We've got to ask you about the vote last night. You voted against this decision to have MPs suspended purely on the arrest for certain offences. Why did you vote against it?
Because I think in this country we have a criminal justice system. That criminal justice system should apply to MPs as it does to everybody else. And being arrested is not being found guilty. Being charged is still not being found guilty. But I think there are more arguments for safety when somebody is charged with an offence. But I think we have to recognise that Parliament is not an ordinary workplace. There are only 650 MPs, and we don't represent ourselves. We represent our constituents. And if an MP is banned from the premises, that's 100,000 people who are not being represented. And also it's a very high profile job, and of course that invites vexatious complaints. And if MPs can be banned from Parliament for being arrested, then it's going to lead to an increase in vexatious complaints. So of course MPs are never popular when they speak up for their own rights and their own privileges, but we should be speaking up for the rights of MPs and their constituents in 10, 20, 30 years time, and we should be taking decisions that will encourage good people to come into Parliament and want to be in Parliament, and I'm afraid last night we did the opposite.
OK, Conservative MP Miriam Cates made that woman Prime Minister. That's it.
She made that case brilliantly, didn't she, on that point?
She is brilliant. That's it from us for this morning. Up next, Emily and Tom, they are right there waiting for you. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9:30.
See you tomorrow.
Yes, a showdown between Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, and the trade union chiefs, who will come out on top. This is all to do with workers' rights.
Plus, much more reaction to the astonishing verdict in the Valdo Calacani case. This is a man who killed 3, but is not being decreed a murderer. The case is not particularly settling.
No, it isn't indeed. Stay with us. Lots more to come after the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A dull and a damp day for many today, but it will be brighter compared to yesterday in parts of Wales and southwest England, and northern Scotland again doing OK for some warm sunshine here. But sunshine in short supply today over southern Scotland, northern and eastern parts of England, North Wales too, staying pretty dull and pretty damp throughout, maybe brightening up at times across the east coast of England. Much brighter compared to yesterday for Wales and southwest England, some sunny spells here, but possibility of 1 or 2 sharp showers. Feeling warmer here as well, but for most under the cloud and rain, feeling cooler. But northern Scotland, look at that, a bit of sunshine in the Moray Firth. Could see temperatures easily into the low 20s. The rain will continue to drift into parts of western Scotland, southern Scotland, the far north of England, staying pretty damp well into this evening. But further south, the rain should generally peter out. A few more showers milling into parts of Devon, Cornwall and Pembrokeshire. Quite a mild night again. Temperatures holding up 11 or 12 Celsius in towns and cities. On to Wednesday, and it could again be pretty drab over some eastern coastal counties of England. Grey here with rain and drizzle on and off. The Fret and the Har may return to eastern Scotland. It's a bit brighter over the Midlands, northwest England and southwest Scotland compared to today. Again, western Scotland seeing some good spells of sunshine. Just 1 or 2 scattered showers in the southwest. And in the sunny spells, feeling quite warm. Goodbye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.